Good afternoon, Nick. It's Monday, and let me just say, it's really good to be back. Now, I'm sorry that I haven't been uploading very many videos. I was already a little bit slow on the uptake for some videos, but over the winter, it's just really cut down completely. And there's a couple of different reasons for that. The first reason is that I often feel, in comparison to your videos, I often feel that Montana's just not different enough from Greensboro for me to really comment on a lot of the cultural shifts that I've seen. In a lot of ways, Bozeman in particular does feel a bit like Greensboro, just more mountains, less people, colder, and a lot more snow. And perhaps that's because partially because it's a college town, so it's a little bit more metropolitan. But Montana is a part of the United States, and overall, despite the differences between the northeast, the south, the east, the west, and the southwest, there's in a lot of ways the differences aren't quite so staggering, or at least they're not as staggering as I've noticed. And I just wanted to say that I really enjoy the videos that you produce because you're always coming at it from a very curious perspective. You always approach it very cordially and you explore it in a really interesting way. And I just don't feel like there's enough of that for me to explore in Montana. The other part of the problem is that I've been working on a couple of side projects. I know, big surprise. So I'm working on the Integrated Services project at the HRDC, and I'm doing a side job. But I'm also working on this. This is Stephen Ministries. And Stephen Ministries is a faith-based peer-to-peer counseling program that deals with helping people adjust to really exceptionally impactful events that happen in their lives. So it focuses primarily the focus is primarily on things such as divorce, the death of a loved one, a diagnosis of a serious or terminal illness, all sudden loss, job loss, or a variety of other impactful events that are just really difficult for a lot of people to get through by themselves. And so in joining up with getting this shiny new badge for Stephen Ministries, what happened was I had to go through about 52 hours worth of training plus some additional conference courses and study and some additional training besides that. And what it kind of led me to realize as I talked to people around the area, dealing with the HRDC and talking with other resources throughout the community, is that Montana has a very big problem. Big problem with mental health. And that's really going to be the subject of the next few videos that I'm going to upload. I'm going to address Montana's mental health crisis and in a couple of different ways, discuss the problems with it, and discuss in particular suicide and the effects of the opioid epidemic in Montana in particular. Which is a really cheery subject, I know, but it fits the dreariness of the outside of the spring weather for Montana, which apparently is just all gray. But I think that it's a really interesting, unique, it's a unique problem within Montana because there's a conflux of a variety of negative factors that really exacerbate the problem that the United States has in general with mental health resources. And I'm going to start off just by talking a brief overview of some baseline issues that kind of really make those cracks deepen. One of those is that Montana's a really big state, but it doesn't have very many people. It's about 3 times the size of North Carolina, only has 1 million people or so, and a good 400,000 of those are in 4 big pockets on the western side of Montana. And the rest of the population, all about 650,000 of them, are kind of dispersed upon the east, or like smaller little towns on the Rocky Mountain side, or in the east on the prairies. And what this does is it really it makes it difficult for a lot of people necessarily to have connections throughout the community if you're stuck in a farm you have, a couple hundred acres until your neighbor. It can be difficult to develop relationships sometimes, and cultivate bonds that kind of keep society together. But more than that, it really stretches the state's resources and funding for mental health assistance to the brink. And Montana has been overall above average in terms of spending for per Montanan on mental health resources, about almost $250 per person, which is pretty high. It's about seventh in the nation. But still, Montana has an incredibly big problem with both the opioid epidemic and suicide. And approximately 46,000 Montanans suffer from very severe mental health issues, which is approximately the size of the city that I live in now, Bozeman. So, it's not really helped when the state can't raise enough revenue and decides to put on austerity and cut funding for both social welfare programs like SNAP and also resources for mental health. And the state had to, or the state did, shut down a variety of mental health facilities and state-run facilities throughout much of Montana, which makes it incredibly difficult for people who otherwise would have resources fairly close by to get access to the resources that they might need. It can be very difficult if you're struggling with mental health to drive 4 hours to the nearest big city that's got a resource center. And it's certainly no help in a crisis. So this is partially because of difficulties with taxes and trying to get things through the state Senate and Congress, but it also has issues because the Senate, the legislative session for Montana, only meets at once every 2 years. So it can make it very difficult for them to respond to the crises in the communities, and it makes it their response very sluggish when it does happen. And that's the reason that they only meet once every 2 years is simply because of a lack of revenue, because of the overwhelmingly rural and frankly fairly poor population that they have to tax from, because there is no sales tax, and they're unwilling to raise taxes on tourists and stuff like that. So for a lot of Montanans, it is a struggle to get even the most basic resources that they need to survive, in terms of having an affordable shelter over your head, putting enough food on the plate, or keeping the house warm in the winter. But additionally, for a lot of Montanans, a lot of those same Montanans in fact, it can be very difficult just to be able to keep your wits about you and have the mental health resources available to you that you might need. So, while we may oftentimes categorize Montana as kind of the grim up north, the snowy wilderness, for a lot of Montanans, it's just grim. I'll see you later, Nick.